Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting of the Fargo School Board to order. Welcome, good evening. Linda is running late on the way back from Minneapolis, so she will join us when she gets here. Approval of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda as prepared.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. Correspondence. Does anyone have any correspondence to share? Okay. Recognition of the audience. There was nobody who signed up when I brought the list in. If there's anybody who's joined us who didn't know the procedure and wishes to address the board. Okay. Nobody from the audience. Staff reports. David, FEA.
I have a couple here. We have invited Jim to come to our rep assembly on February 24th to talk to our members about the mill levy vote coming up, informational meeting, and so he'll be there for that. We have decided to go with March 3rd through the 7th as our Gene Week to support our scholarships fund. It goes along with Read Across America Week, so we'll correlate those together. And we'll be giving out 4 scholarships this year to all the 4 high schools. This will be the first year that we've included Woodrow, so look forward to doing that. And each month that's coming up, we're just doing a little leadership information on all of our members. We'll be doing a little celebration each month. This one is for our new members. We'll be doing bowling in February. So it'll be just kind of gathering of our members and trying to get people together and just a little socializing. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Dr. Gross, Student Mobility Report.
Thank you very much. Attached to the memo that's in the agenda and also I believe out on the table is a copy of the preliminary mobility report. What I'd like to draw your attention to is that this is data for 4 months, September through December. So you get an idea of the beginning of our process. As you look at the data that's in front of you, you'll notice that all of the charts and graphs contain percentages and not student numbers. The reason for that is in some cases the number in a category was so small that we did not want to provide any information that might identify a student. So it's really done to keep the anonymity of our students. But on page 1 of the report, if you'll notice, there's a very small chart in there that shows the total numbers of in and out, transfers ins and outs by level. And over the course of those 4 months, September through December, we had over 500 students either transfer in or out to the Fargo Public Schools. And when you consider that our population is around 10,900 students, that's about 4.5% of our students are either in or out in just those 4 months of September through December. And you can see the numbers, again, that's on page 1. Then as you look at or go further into the document, on page 3, I just provided for you 2 different charts. One that shows you the transfer in kindergarten through grade 5 and where they came to us from. In most cases, you'll notice the large majority are from either the state of Minnesota or out of state. A large portion, in fact, I believe over 50% of our new students came to us by that way. And then below that is the transfer out. If you compare those 2 charts, they actually look pretty similar. So the students, as they come to us, they are leaving in about the same numbers, going to the same locations. Page 4 of the report shares with you the middle school data. Again, same categories, transfer in, transfers out. This was probably the smallest number, one, because we're only dealing with 3 grade levels at a time, but also it seemed to be a little bit more stable at the middle school than our other 2 levels. But you can see from the data where our students came to us and where they left and where they went. And then finally on page 5 is the data for our high school. On the transfer out, there are 2 additional categories that are not on the middle level data, and that would be the students who we know of who have entered a GED program or the percentage of students who at this time have chosen a dropout. But you'll notice again it's percentages because of the small number of students in each of those categories. This is a preliminary report, and what I will do at the end of the year is provide another report for you for the entire school year There will be more data, so we will be able to get into numbers as opposed to just percentages. And then we will break it down into some of the same categories that we have as we present data to you around state assessment data or other assessment categories. So that's the preliminary report, and I would entertain any questions that you might have.
Excuse
Madam
me.
President, Dr. Gross, if I'll be looking forward to the further analysis of dropouts and as you get into drill deeper, which I remember by school and so on. But that 1%, what's that 1% of? Is it 1% of the age they can drop out, or age of the entire high school population? Or help me get my arms around that, if you would, please.
The data that's on page 5 is the total number of students who started the year in grades 9 through 12. So that 1% is a percentage of our students who are freshmen through senior.
Go ahead.
100% of all of the students in the district of 9 through 12, or those that transferred out?
The data is a percentage of the students who are in grades 9 through 12. The less than 1% is there is the total number of students who have indicated they have left us, divided by the total number of students who have left us over the course of those 4 months. So it's just that small subset of that population.
Transferred out.
Correct.
Thank you very much. We look forward to the detailed report towards the end of the year. Facilities update. Dr. Schatz, Brock, who wants to go? Decide who wants to go first?
Thank you. I'll go first. I'll take the warehouse and do that, and then I'll have Brock do the HVAC in New Elementary School. As you know, the city has informed us that with the dike project or the flood wall project downtown, that they'll need to buy out our warehouse in order to make way for that project. And so we have been working with the city administrator's office on that, and currently they're doing an assessment, an appraisal of that building, and we have not heard back yet on where they have come with that. I have been working throughout the city looking at spaces and places where we could relocate that warehouse. We went and toured one facility that is up for sale here in town, but we don't think that would meet the needs that we have. There are very few properties that are existing that would be probably feasible for us to look at as a warehouse property. So we are currently also looking at other pieces of land within the city and what might work for that. We have visited with an architect, and we are going to do a schematic of what a potential warehouse might look like, what it might entail, and give us some ideas of cost for that. And then once we have that, plus we have options for where we might be able to move, then we would bring that information back to you as a board. The architect is just doing a very simple schematic right now. It is not an architect for the project. It's just to give us that preliminary information. Once we have that, we'll bring that back. Our timeline right now is to try to come to you by April with some options for you to give us feedback on and some direction. And hopefully by this summer, we would decide on what we're going to do and be able to start moving forward with that. We're on a short timeline, as we are, it seems like, with everything. But the city is planning to move quickly on that project, and all indications that we have right now is they want to have that project completed by sometime into the fall and early winter of 2015. And so it's become a time-sensitive issue. But that's where we're at today, and as we continue to move forward, I'll bring back more information to you.
John?
Madam President, Dr. Schatz, is the city acting under will they go to eminent domain if we end up in some situation of non-agreement?
Yes.
Else have questions for Dr. Schatz on this topic?
Okay, having said that, I'll turn it over to Brock for the other updates on our facilities projects.
Okay, Madam President, members of the board, 2 items remaining for us to discuss. I'll start with HVAC and actually postpone that, but as you know, Or you may remember, today was the first opening that we had for the HVAC bids. We had a bid opening for the Madison project. We will have 2 bid openings per week for the next 3 weeks, and we'll be bringing you those for approval as we, for action, excuse me, as we proceed. But we do have that as a late addition as part of the consent agenda, and we can talk about that in more specifics if you'd like to discuss the proposal for Madison when we get to that portion of the agenda. The second item for me to discuss with you is the new elementary school and the progress that we're making for the school that will be built at Ed Clapp Park. Last Tuesday, I believe it was, we had a planning committee meeting, and Kevin Bartram is with us tonight that can answer any questions you might have as well. He came, as well as Steve Gertz, to planning and talked to us about the closest thing we currently have to working drawings. We're finalizing that. We suspect that'll be done in the next few weeks. And then we have also a preliminary estimate for the facility. Kevin and Steve walked through kind of a site plan and a footprint and what it looks like, all the planning that we've done with the design team, which was made up of principals and retired principals who have some building experience in the district, as well as teachers of various departments. Dr. Gross, myself, Rachel, Jim Free, Bill Westrick, we're all on that design team to really get feedback about, what are we looking for and what types of spaces do we want. We reviewed facilities in our district. We also went to West Fargo, did a walkthrough of one of their facilities. At the end of the day, what Kevin and his team did is really took the bulk of the footprint of Kennedy and put it on the site at Ed Clapp Park and then started to work from there as far as what we would have. So we walked through all those particulars for a 4-section elementary school that would meet the needs of what we are looking for in Fargo Public Schools. It is equipped with all of the necessary ancillary spaces that we have talked about. It has some additional enhancements to not only the site, but the building itself, as part of the agreement with the Park District to be able to put the facility on that land and to take that project out to bid next week. Is that correct, Kevin? Okay. And so we'll have that project prepared to bid and see how those bids will come in. Preliminary estimates on this facility are $15.8 million. It's an 83,000 square foot facility. We will be continuing to work with the design team and internally with some of the FF&E and things of that nature to see if there's things we can do with that budget number to make sure that we've taken a look at all aspects, and then certainly we'll see in the bidding climate how that will come in. So with that, I would entertain any questions, or Kevin certainly is here to answer any questions you might have as well in regards to those of you who are at planning or those of you that weren't, what got discussed at that meeting as well.
Paul?
Brock, I read the exchange that you had with Rusty with regard to comparing the prices of the schools, but I didn't see a final follow-up on that, and maybe it came in after I quit looking at it, and nor was I at the planning committee. I'm not on that committee, but it does seem as if this new school is slightly higher per square foot than a comparable school in West Fargo, and I'm just wondering, maybe you want to give the board some insight to that.
Sure. Members of the board, Paul, I will speak to as much of that as I can, and Kevin might have some additional insight as he explained to the planning committee really about what types of things were different in footprint and really size and things of that nature. A number of things are different as far as size of corridors within the building itself, 6-foot corridors, and we are currently at how wide? We're about little, so
Yeah.
obviously.
Brock, Kevin, if you wouldn't
Sure.
mind standing there and turning the microphone on, then everybody
So
can hear
we're
you.
wider
Thank you.
there. Our classrooms themselves are approximately 90 square feet larger than the classrooms that are, similar classrooms that are built in West Fargo. I did have conversation with Mark Lemaire this evening about the different sizes of the gyms. We've done an improvement to our gym space as part of the agreement with the Park District, so they can do some community volleyball, things like that, so you can run 2 volleyball courts sideways. That's different than what West Fargo does. Number of ancillary spaces, special services rooms, Mark didn't remember the exact number. He thought they had 10 or 11 in their most recent elementary. We have 14 special service rooms to include ELL, title rooms, special services, things of that nature. So, you know, there's differences in just the footprint itself and how we build the schools from a size-wise perspective. And what Kevin did is really took the Kennedy footprint and said, what size of classrooms, corridors, et cetera, has Fargo Public Schools typically built? And let's match that and make sure that that stays with the philosophy we've had in how we build. So those are some of the differences, but you may.
Yeah, I think that was a very good summary of the differences. What I might add is that there were a lot of site costs with this project that aren't typical. For instance, because of the arrangement with the city and the library and the park district, there's the need to build some parking for the library that replaces the parking that's lost when 28th Street goes in. It's a 34-car parking lot plus repairs to their existing parking lot to sort of get the library back to the parking number of spaces that they have right now before the project. There's also 3 soccer fields that are being rebuilt and irrigated. That is part of the agreement with the park district in exchange for the land, and that sort of thing. And I think you had mentioned the restrooms and the storage room that the park district, their space needs that are added to the building. Probably the biggest thing that impacts the cost on this is the site itself, and I've talked to the committee a little bit about that, but it's good to go over it again. As you can recall, this was the old Fargo ski hill, and there were some, and are some issues with the soil, but they're manageable issues. The ski hill itself has been gone for a long time, but the flood of '09, a lot of the soil was excavated from that site to build dikes around town, and then it was brought back, but it wasn't compacted. It was just sort of dumped on site. So to build on this site right now, we have to dig that soil out and then put it back in a compacted manner. It doesn't sound like a very big deal, but we're kind of correcting both issues at the same time, the ski hill and the bad soil. So we're essentially digging a 15-foot pit that's a little bit oversized from the footprint of the building, and then bringing that same clay back after digging the hole, bringing it back in 8-inch lifts, kind of basket weaving it as it builds itself up. And the foundation of the building is resting on basically a 10-foot thick, the soil engineers call it a raft. So that clay soil becomes sort of a raft of support for the foundation of the building. Not typical for most buildings. Most of the time you dig out a couple of feet and then build up from there, and so this is adding to the cost of the building. The construction manager estimated at about $400,000 of added cost for the soil repairs to the building. And the repairs are made so that the building doesn't settle unevenly, settle a bunch over here and not over here and cause a cracks. We're trying to get the site so the building sort of settles evenly over a period of time, and it will settle slowly over a period of time. We just don't want to have differential settlement where there's a bunch in one area and not in the other, and then cracks start being caused. The design is very much based on the components of Kennedy, let's put it that way. The classrooms are essentially identical with some improvements. We don't, or some revisions, improvements. We don't have double doors into the rooms. We have a larger single door. We have some communicating doors between a pair of classrooms, so if one teacher is gone to the office briefly, the other sort of paired up teacher can keep an eye on both classrooms. I think the number is something like 17 or 18 special service rooms and a couple of conference rooms, as opposed to Kennedy, I think, has about 6 or 7, something like that, and some of these rooms are a little bit bigger. So there is some more square footage as compared to Kennedy. Kennedy was about 77,000 and some square feet. This is about 83,000 square feet. So the increase in size is primarily due to that, but in addition, the program includes 1 extra classroom. It's a 4-section school, but there's 1 extra classroom for that bubble class that kind of ends up going through where you might have a 5-section classroom need periodically, and there are 2 music rooms, and there's an art room as well. So those spaces are included in there, and that has driven the square footage up a little bit compared to Kennedy.
Want to add first, Brock, and then Robin has a question.
Yeah, Madam President, members of the board, one other piece is when you talked about comparative to other districts, Paul, is West Fargo builds a 5-section school, their most recent 1 through 5, and we have a 4-section K through 5, and so the kindergarten classrooms are slightly larger. They have restroom facilities in them, so you've got a different, philosophically, you've got a different classroom design for at least 4 of the classrooms in the building as well, which adds some square footage also. So just, again, to point out some of the differences just based on how we provide services versus how they provide services, and that's how we've typically proceeded.
Robin?
That's what I was going to ask you to add, so thank you.
Chris?
Thank you. I just wanted to share for those who weren't in planning that part of the discussion was, from my perspective, do we need to have such large classrooms if we're now building an ancillary space, if students are getting pulled out for different services? But in the discussion, if the mill levy doesn't pass and we do, and a consequence of that might be raising class sizes, we may need bigger classrooms. And so it's kind of a catch-22. Do we need 90 square feet larger classrooms than West Fargo has if we have all the ancillary space? Or, not to be a fly in the ointment, can we have smaller classrooms? Do we want smaller classrooms? I mean, we're not supposed to act on this as a board, it's just for information, but that was part of the discussion to figure out is 83,000 square feet the right amount?
Madam President and Brock and Kevin, one thing a question I still have in my mind, and I'm not an expert at all on energy, but even after our discussion in planning, it became news that California is having a shortage of natural gas. And yet we kind of hope that won't happen. If you could help me understand and be more comfortable again, the essential differences between geothermal, the essential sense of upfront costs versus ongoing costs, I would still be appreciating that.
Well, I'll do my best. I'm not a mechanical engineer, and there is a mechanical engineer in the room, but he's not working on this project. But we might defer to him a little bit. But the other schools that have been built most recently in the district, Bennett and Kennedy, had a geothermal system. They were both located in Cass County Electric's territory, and Cass County Electric has traditionally had better off-peak electric rate programs where you put a load shedding generator in and they'll give you a discounted electrical rate over a period of time. But what's happened now in the last, say, few years, and especially over the course of the last 10 years, is electric rates, which used to be very, very, very stable, barely bumping up even for years at a time, now we're seeing increases. So they've seen some pressures in the industry, from what I understand. The coal-fired plants, nuclear power, other things like that are impacting them and their utility rates, issues with the grid and other things like that. So their rates continue to climb. In the meantime, gas rates, which, when engineers are comparing utility costs on different projects, gas rates have fallen, drastically fallen. I hadn't heard the information about California, but everything that we hear around this area is that from people in the industry are that gas prices are going to stay very, very low, and that electrical rates are going to go up, continue to go up. I forgot to mention, too, when I was talking about Cass County Electric, this project now is in Xcel's territory. Xcel does not have the same program that Cass County Electric does for a generator rate. And in the past on these schools, we've suggested, and you've put in load shedding generators. That's an alternate bid on this project for you to consider a load shedding generator. The payback in the past has been probably 7, 8, maybe up to 10 years with the added cost of a generator in the geothermal well field. Now the payback is starting to approach 20, 25 years, something like that. Very viable to put in the load shedding generators, unless you want to do it to have that capability of backing up all power just for other purposes. So we are bidding that as an alternate. Don't have a crystal ball by any stretch of the imagination. Geothermal systems, by their name, sounds like you're getting a great deal of energy from the earth, but you're using electricity to get that energy, and that's where we've seen the electric rates going up have pushed the cost of those systems up to the point where gas-type systems right now. I wish I could say 10 years from now what's going to be the case, but all indications that we're hearing from people are that that's still forward. A few other things that have come up in the last few years: the energy code requires more insulation in these buildings than a few years ago. So So almost, 50% more in terms of thickness of insulation in walls than what was there before. Windows are more efficient, roofs more energy efficient and things like that. So whatever system you use is going to benefit from the added insulation in the walls. So I'm not sure I've answered that question completely, but when we did an analysis, a payback analysis of a geothermal system as opposed to other systems that were relying on gas, there really was cheaper first cost, and it was cheaper utility cost-wise to go.
Thank you, Kevin, for taking the time to come down tonight and answer questions. We appreciate it. Brock, do you have anything else? Thank you. So now we're at other staff reports. Brock, do you have anything else?
Not at this moment.
Dr. Gross?
Nothing at this time.
Yes, you. Anne Marie?
Yes, you'll see at your tables that you have been given a special election frequently asked questions that recently developed. That is also online on the special election webpage, so just want to make you aware that that is another tool to help if people have questions.
Thank you very much. Consent agenda. Rick?
I'd like to move to approve the consent agenda with the exception of pulling 6D off the consent agenda.
Second.
And seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. So we have now approved the consent agenda pieces A. So D.
I'm going to turn this over to Brock at this time.
Madam President, members of the board, you have in front of you a late edition that came today as a result of the first bid opening for the HVAC project that we are proceeding with. This is the bid opening for Madison Elementary. Brent Wavra is here as well from ONE, who is designing this project for us to answer any questions that you might have. You'll notice in the memo that there were several companies that bid on mechanical and electrical, as well as the temperature controls and the testing and balancing. The original estimate for Madison was 1.48 million. Just rounded that. You see that information in front of you, $1,481,715.25. You see that the bids came in significantly higher than that, about $210,000 higher than the original estimate. And at this time, what we are recommending that you do is to not take action tonight on awarding bids for this particular project. We do have another bid opening that will happen on Thursday for McKinley Elementary. Then we have two of them that will happen next week on Tuesday and Thursday as well. And certainly we would like to get a broader flavor for what the bidding environment will be. There are some aspects to Madison that may drive prices up because of the nature of the building, and Brent could certainly speak to that better than I can. But we want to find out is this being over the estimate exclusive to Madison, and we will see that others will be under because of the nature of those buildings, or is this something that we're going to see in all of the bids as we go through them? So our recommendation at this point would be that we do not take action as a board and award bids, and we will have another bid opening on Thursday and then continue to see how the project as a whole comes in. And with that, I would take any questions you might have.
Robin?
We were told earlier that in the bid process, until we're accepting them, or we accept the low bids, does that freeze up some business for those that bid?
Members of the board, Robin, maybe I can ask Brent to come up too, and he can speak to that. He's talked to many of the contractors. I believe your question to be, as we accept bids, then they will know either how they'll bid on next ones, or now they are full with work, and so other people will drive bids. I don't think that we're at a critical stage of that with the opening of just one project, but Brent can probably speak.
Exactly correct. Right now, with the two bids opening up today, and another bid opening up on Thursday on here, we've always given the opportunity to take the lowed bid, but also the most qualified contractor associated with it. If we find out that contractor A is low on these two first projects, then when the next project next Tuesday bids on there, they happen to be low on number 3, we can at that point then say, okay, we feel, and they probably will as well, is that they are probably overwhelmed with the workload on there and would not be accepted of the third bid.
John?
Madam President Brock, I'm curious, the bigger picture with regard to the overall financing of all of these projects and the new elementary school coming, if you could remind us of, was it a 27 million ceiling, and we're applying for construction loan funds from the state? And I'm just cautious about getting indications that, and we all know the trends are across the state are driving up costs, and projections we understand are for even higher costs next year. If you could help me through that, please.
Members of the board, John, the first part of your question as it relates to the protest period for issuing of bonds that we had approved a couple of months back. We will be bringing, possibly to the next meeting, information from our bond representatives about what do we want to move forward with potentially for bonding. The limit in the building fund is, I believe it was 27.7, Rick, is that what you recall? Yeah, and so that would put us in a place where we knew that the available limit was higher than the original estimates for the projects that we were working on. That being said, we also talked about potential other options for funding, whether it be some through the state loan construction, and we certainly are going through that process, and as Dr. Schatz reported at a prior meeting, those funds are currently all spent with some laying in wait, proposals laying in wait in the queue with no dollars to fund them, and we will be one of those until the state would do something different there. As Jim has talked to us at previous meetings about, other funding options to potentially include cash infusion, which would lower the amount that we would potentially bond for. So the issue really becomes at some point when we have hard numbers through bid processes to determine what is the total of these two capital projects that we're working on, what number are we comfortable bonding and what number are we comfortable buying down, if that's how you would view that. Currently, the way things would unfold, we would be pushing right up against that 27 million that's available in the building fund and has the ability to service. Now again, bids have not come in yet. Preliminary estimates on the elementary school are, likely going to be different than the final bid number. This is the first of 6 bids for HVAC, and this one is higher. Others might be lower. I still feel a comfort level, a little more nervous today than I was before, but still feel a comfort level that these 6 projects will come in at or below the number that Brent and his company have estimated early on in this process. So that's kind of an overview, I guess, of the questions that you had.
Welcome, Linda. Have a question on this? Well, in that case, I believe we'll take your advice and leave this to our next discussion on Friday. Thank you. Where are we? Business policy monitoring. We had 2 policies that we looked at in the last period. Robin?
I move approval of L 12 and 13 as presented.
Second? Seconded? Discussion? Does anybody have discussion before we comment? It's pretty straightforward. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I'm just curious if Robin got an answer to how do New Americans complete the exams?
Mm-hmm.
I did
Okay.
separately. Bob had sent me an email, and he talked about how they take audio tests, right? Go ahead.
According to the state, with the state assessment, all students who are English language learners must take the state assessment in math and science. In the area of reading, students who are new to the country, up to 12 months are exempt from the assessment. Although, once a student does take the assessment, there are multiple accommodations that can be put in place for those students based upon a team decision, from simplifying the directions, reading some of the items out loud, and in the area of science and math, using a dictionary that would convert the language. There are more options for reading and science than there are in the language arts component of that. And then when we look at our own measures of academic progress, because that's an assessment that we require of our students, it's a team decision to decide if it's appropriate for that student to take that assessment. But since that assessment is one that is dynamically developed for the student as they take the assessment, if they get it wrong, the next item is a little bit easier for them. Most students do take that assessment because it gives us a good understanding of where they're at.
Anybody else have any additional comments on the ELs? In that case, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. So, past meetings, we referred a couple of ELs to governance to go over. Where are we? My papers are backwards here. Missing page. Sorry, guys. Okay, apologize. EL 15. First one is on here. In your presence, you will see that there's only a change to number 5 there, to indicate the discussion was whether or not all of these policies were always posted at the schools, and they're lots and lots of paper, and the habit hasn't necessarily been to have all the paper posted, for instance, on a bulletin board. And they are certainly always available in the schools for anyone who wishes to ask for them, and they're available online for anyone who goes to the website. So in order to update the information, we are striking the words posted or in the number 5 there. Does anyone have any questions regarding? Robin?
I move that we accept the changes presented to student learning environment and discipline.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Please
Aye.
say. Thank you. Any opposed, same sign? Thank you. GP3E. So the discussion here was really a bit of wordsmithing to make the policies more accurately reflect what we're actually doing. So you'll see on the back side of the first page, it's highlighted for you, that the proposal is to adjust the wording so it's read as planning and governance policy review, excuse me, and then add in governance and policy review in the second paragraph there, as opposed to the word policy making. And it's really the governance job that's happening here. So does anyone have about this? Robin?
I move that we accept the changes presented in the governance process.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed, same sign? Motion passed. Board reports, committee and liaison reports. How about we start with Rick? Microphone, please.
Planning met on February 4th. We spent a fair amount of time looking at the update on the Ed Clapp Elementary project as we reviewed this evening. In addition to that, we we looked at, was given notice that the administration will be looking at a RFP for an employee benefit plan brokerage type of a service, and we'll be kept up to speed on that at this point. Nothing really, no action taken, or just information only. We did review all the HVAC bid openings and tried to coordinate the special board meetings, and I think you've all got that email in front of you as well, this last week. And our next meeting was March 7th. That was it for planning. That's all I have.
Rusty?
Diane and I presented at Fargo South last night, the mill levy and LRFP, and it went well.
Madam President, Robin covered for me, and I attended with her the presentation at Hawthorne School. She's so experienced at this, but thank you, Robin, for doing that.
I got a few things. I did meet with the Horace Mann Roosevelt PTA, I guess a week ago now, and my other PTA, Jefferson, is scheduled for, I believe, next week on the 18th. The Southeast Education Cooperative Exec Committee is meeting tomorrow, although I haven't seen the agenda yet, so I'm not even sure what we're meeting about, but we are meeting, I know that. The State School Board Association had a board meeting, plus had their annual non-renewal superintendent search negotiations / all-in-one seminar at the lovely Ramada Inn in Bismarck, which had no plumbing. So they had everybody in the hotel move to a different hotel. We still had the meeting there, and they brought porta potties in, which was really an exciting, fun time, to say the least. At the state school board meeting, we covered a number of topics, kind of got an update on how the new format worked in Washington, D.C. by the team from North Dakota that went. The state associations are being asked to consider taking a marketing role on marketing the national affiliate program for the national. We as a board elected not to have our state association get involved actively in that, because we really don't think there's a whole lot of additional school districts that will be joining anyway in North Dakota. I think we have 11 districts currently that are national affiliate districts. We talked a little bit about the sick leave policy or lack thereof. Apparently we have some long-term staff people that have about a year of sick leave at this point in time, and there's no provision for any kind of payback, use up, anything. So that's kind of going to be researched over the next few months and talked about at the summer board meeting. We also had a discussion on the new dues structure, which actually takes effect in July of this year for the first time, and put the staff back to working on some number crunching based upon seeing if we took a different approach to the tiered approach, what would that actually have to be to generate the same number of dollars. And that'll come back at our summer meeting as well. I think that's it for the state school board meeting. And as David indicated, I'm going to be meeting with the FEA building leadership group. I think that's a rep from each building, right? February 24th over at Agassiz, I believe, is where we're meeting. I think that's it. If you haven't done your homework from GAC yet and contacted all your people, please make sure you try to get to those legislators. And then if you'd be kind enough to send some kind of follow-up phone call or email to Mary Ann, even if it's to say, I left a message and never heard back. We're also finding some of our contact information's outdated. Some of these legislators, their phone numbers are no longer working. So anything like that you come across, if you get that back to Mary Ann, then we'll have the most up-to-date data possible. But we certainly appreciate it from GAC committee for you reaching out to those legislators to see if they have any questions. That's it.
Thank you. Robin?
Visited Madison, Bennett, and CBH PTAs. Interestingly, apparently the city PTA has come out on this mill levy election and is allowing PTAs to take statements on this. So Hawthorne did hold a vote, and they unanimously passed to support the mill levy. So that was kind of new. The governance committee met with the editorial board on this same topic. And then I've been requested to speak at some different service groups around town on the same topic. So I presented to a Kiwanis group the other day. As far as communications committee we're all worn out, so we're not going to have a February meeting, which would have been this Thursday. But you did see a little bit of sampling of stuff we've been working on, compiling those frequently asked questions, and Anne Marie did a nice job pulling those together. So other than that, our next meeting will be the second Thursday in March.
I don't have anything to report directly on school board matters, but I wanted to report that last week was the symphony concert for all of the fourth graders in Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, and Denise Odegaard has taken over from Gino Learning Bank, and that's the consortium of 3 school districts to provide a high-quality arts experience for each grade. And I just wanted to give kudos here to Denise. We usually have it over at Concordia, but they have roof issues this year, so we had to move it to NDSU, which is a smaller capacity. And short of rooting for a flu epidemic, we didn't have enough space for all the kids and teachers' performances. So she found resources to add a 3rd performance. And the highlight was an 11-year-old composer from Kindred who wrote. Great, and thanks to Denise for coordinating.
Great, thank you. Paul?
I attended the Ben Franklin PTA and gave a scintillating presentation there, and was also pleased to be a part of the governance editorial board meeting. I thought we made some good progress with the forum, and were able to communicate our thoughts. And for those of you who weren't there, I thought they asked some good questions, and for the most part, good answers.
Chris?
Well, our son didn't actually write it or compose anything, but he did play the tambourine on stage at one of those performances, and so that's really the highlight of his whole year, has been that tambourine. Just quickly met with Senator Tyler Axness, who's a young senator from District 6. Very eager to hear about the mill levy, and also eager session rolls around. So that was very successful.
Thank you. President's report, I will pass around because there's a piece here that I want you to have. First of all, I presented at Centennial and at South with Rusty. The governance committee, it's been mentioned already, had an editorial meeting with the forum editorial board, and it was a really good exchange. They're always very open and interested and ask good questions, and I think it's a relationship that is a good one for us to have. It went well. There's several dates listed there for you. Most importantly, the 3 special meetings related to the HVAC piece, the first of which is this Friday. So I would appreciate it if you would let Anne Marie know whether you're going to be here in person in the room, or if you have to be on the phone, so that we can make the appropriate arrangements for each of those weeks. So and if you don't know all 3 weeks ahead of time, that's fine, but at least 1 week at a time, let her know that. At a past meeting, you may remember that Rick asked some questions about the makeup of the board in terms of numbers and some of the other pieces. So I asked Anne Marie to do a little basic research, and we've provided that for you on the back of the president's report, highlighted the pieces of state statute which govern the makeup of the Fargo School Board, and how and if it could be changed. And the most important part is that, notwithstanding the provisions of this section, the Board of Education of the City of Fargo consists of 9 members. So wanted you all to have that and see that. You had a question, Rick?
Well, if I may, just a comment to add to that. And so, yeah, we took a look at this, and basically, as Dinah indicated, that's in statute, I think. And so if we were ever looking at changing the size of the Fargo School Board, it would take a change in statute at some point. So that's the deal there.
Okay, so in addition to the items that you see on the piece of paper, Robin wanted me to mention that it is Kindness Week this week, so hope you will all be kind to one another. Is it-
Perfect. Yes, it's Kindness Week this week.
At
It's
Fargo
Kindness
North it
Week.
is, at the least, at
Yeah,
Hawthorne.
it probably is.
It's Giving Hearts Week.
Giving Hearts Week, yes. And I also wanted to, as I'm sure you all have seen, Chris has officially declared that she's running for our state legislature. And I'd like to wish her good luck on behalf of the board and say that it will be wonderful to have someone who understands us sitting in the state as a friend for us. So all the best in that area. Does anybody else, John, is there a report this week?
There is, and
Our board meetings is reading these kids' insights. We do. We have, Jim Free had a birthday last week, and I'm not sure if he's left the room, but he was February 4th, and Brock's is coming up, February 16th. Happy birthday early, Brock.
Does anyone else have anything? Well, in that case, the next regular meeting is February the 25th, but prior to that, we have two special meetings, one on the 14th and one on the 21st. Debriefing. Oh, I beg your pardon?
me. Given where the bids came in on the HVAC this time around, and we've got one bid coming on Thursday, correct? If there's no action going to be suggested as a possibility, would we cancel the meeting on Friday? I mean, to have a meeting with no action would be kind of
Yeah.
pointless.
Brock? I mean, I guess we hadn't got to that point yet, but very good question.
Members of the board, Rick, certainly following the opening, we do that at 2 o'clock on Thursday. I can certainly be in communication with Dinah, and if we feel like we have a similar situation to what we had today, we could certainly make that decision. That would be a decision of Dinah's. I guess I'd be looking for some direction for the board. How far out do we want to get before we would take action? If the opening on Thursday comes in at or below what the estimate was, are you comfortable proceeding with that one and still waiting on the one we have here until we see if those dollars are made up, or do you want to see a broader picture? There's no right or wrong answer to that question, but certainly I can be communicating with Dinah once we know more and then make a decision on that.
Anyone have anything specific to share regarding that before we see what happens and make a decision? Oh, sorry, Jim.
Well, I guess I'll just think out loud. Let's assume the worst-case scenario, and the next bid comes in the same percentage look that this one had. And we could choose not to have a board meeting and then have two more bid openings that would occur. Now we have 4 bids out there, nothing that's been accepted or rejected. At some point in time, we'll either have to start accepting or decide we're not doing these because we can't afford to do them all, or we're gonna have to decide we're gonna do these this year and those another year. So part of me thinks we're gonna have to have a board meeting before the next regular board meeting, one way or another, whether it's this coming Friday or the following Friday. And I'm more inclined to have it sooner rather than later, because we may want to give some direction back to our administrative team to, okay, you better start to have an alternative funding scenario if we decide to act on these things, if it's going to be outside the range of what we were comfortable with inside the building fund. So I kind of think regardless of what the bid comes in, we have a discussion to take place. Hopefully one where we're just approving a bid.
Rick?
Thank you. Brock, with tonight's inaction, what message are we sending back to the companies that actually submitted bids?
Members of the board, Rick, typically what happens at a bid opening is we communicate with the contractors that we will be doing a bid tabulation and then having communication with the low bidder and bringing that forward to the board and letting people understand that you were the low bidder in these areas, and we will be submitting a recommendation for board action to award a bid to your company if you are comfortable honoring the bid that you presented. So that's typically what happens. What happened following today's meeting was Brent Wavra from O&E contacted the contractors and said there will not be a recommendation from administration to award bids. The board certainly could take action separate from recommendation of administration, but at this time, due to the price point on these particular bids, there was not a comfort level making a recommendation to award. So the message that's been sent right now is we're not comfortable where things are today. There's another bid opening on Thursday. We would like to see things be in a better comfort zone if we're going to move forward with bid awards.
Follow-up, Brock, do we have any time constraints with regard to the bids themselves as far as this bid is good for X number of days? I mean, typically, if they know they're bidding on multiple projects, there's going to be some limitation that these bids aren't held open indefinitely.
Members of the board, Rick, you have 30 days to award a bid from time of opening.
Trustee?
I assume, and I don't know if you know this, but we'll have different contractors bidding on the next package. So it won't just be mechanically, not these same four. And I think you mentioned maybe Madison might be a unique situation, that maybe the next one might fall in line more with what the estimate was.
Members of the board, Rusty, I'll answer the second part first. Madison, because of the makeup of the building and things that need to happen to protect the floor and some of those things, may have been at a price above the estimate because there's, when contractors did the walkthrough, they may have felt there was more work involved there. The one reason for maybe guarded optimism is McKinley and Madison are not significantly different buildings. And so I think if you're going to see a difference in the bidding, you're going to start to see them in the other four buildings that are significantly different structures than McKinley and Madison. Our hope is McKinley is not at the same level above the estimate that Madison was, and I think conversations with those contractors today will address some of that. But I think where you're going to start to see a difference in the magnitude of the work is when you get into some of the other structures that are different in nature than those two buildings are. The answer to your first part of your question is, I do think we will see all of the same bidders for McKinley as we saw with Madison because of the nature of the buildings. I think when we get into other larger buildings, you will start to see some additional contractors in those bid packages. But there's no reason to believe that there is going to be a significantly larger number. I think those that are looking at these projects, maybe they've picked and choose which ones they would bid on, but I think you're going to see all the ones you see today, and you might see a few extra come in, especially as you get to the larger buildings.
I was just going to make a quick comment. I think that what you're seeing is the complexity of what's going on with these projects, and these are very complex projects. We're looking at a lot of different things, a lot of moving parts. And one of the things that administration struggles with at times is that when we see things that maybe aren't coming in where we thought they would, or something's a little bit different than what we had planned, we're always thinking, okay, where's the board sitting with this? And so I think it's really critical right now that we are having a very specific communication with the board. And I am pleased that we're meeting more often so we can set and vet these things out. We can bring it to you. You guys can talk about it, and we can get the direction we need. So regardless of whether we're bringing you a bid to approve or a bid that we are not comfortable with, I'd like us to be meeting so that we're talking, so that Brock and I can go the direction that we feel that you want us to go. So I hope that we continue on with our meetings.
Madam President, members of the board, a question and then a comment. The window of the bid, the opening of the bids is all in less than how many days? Or is in how many days? If we have a 30-day window to award or act on the earliest of the bids and subsequent bids, what's the window, Brock, of the beginning to the end of the bids for these 6 projects.
If I understand your question, members of the board, John, we are having, so we'll have a bid opening on the 13th, and then we have a bid opening on the 18th and the 20th, and then we have our final bid openings on the 25th and the 27th. So the 27th of February would be the last bid opening, and each one of those is 30 days from the opening of that bid to award.
If I might continue, and this is just conjecturing, and as Jim would say, thinking out loud. My thoughts are that if we see a pattern going on here of being above and beyond what our estimates were, I will probably resort to wanting to see the bigger picture. And if that's a potential pattern, bid by bid by bid, or then I would probably suggest to the board, at least from my position, that we pull back and see them all at once. And rather than, I'd be cautious about piecemealing them together and not sure where we're landing. But that's my thoughts, is if we start to see a pattern there, then I'd want us to discuss not awarding any, even though we had hoped that we would see subsequent lowerings of future bids coming to us. If we do see something different than that, my view would be to pull back and see what the bigger picture would be.
And the response, John, that I would have to that is, of course, we will do whatever the wish of the board is, but we are on a very specific timeline, and any delays in any kind of these processes, either the new elementary school or these HVAC projects, will put us in jeopardy then of completion times, and we know how critical that is because our window of opportunity for any kind of construction is so tight. So, that's why I think having the additional meetings, continuing to discuss these issues in a timely manner really is critical right now. This is our long-range facility plan playing out now. And it's, this is that crunch time. So I think communicating in a timely fashion is really critical, John.
So one thing I'm hearing loud and clear is that it's important for us to keep discussing these pieces. So unless something unusual happens, I'm going to say we're going to have this meeting on Friday, regardless of how the pieces come back. But one thing I will throw out there is that if we feel the necessity, we can discuss the possibility of having an additional meeting next week after the Tuesday opening so that we can see number 3 before we see number 3 and 4 together on the Friday. Because perhaps that will, to John's point, say that, well, there's a pattern here, 3 and out of 6 or whatever. So I'm just throwing that out there for you to put that in your radar in case I'm not saying we're going to do it, but in light of the way the discussion's been going, just keep that as a possibility, and we'll see what happens on Friday and determine where we go from there. So again, to the point that I raised earlier, if you're not able to be here in the room on Friday, if you could let Anne Marie know so that we're appropriately set up for that. Anything else is everybody okay with leaving it that place with the HVAC piece? Okay. Back to debriefing. Is there anything anyone has about debriefing? Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll see you all on Friday. Meeting adjourned.